Welcome to Advocacy Training, Tips and Tools for Effective Advocacy. I'm Marie Sullivan, your host for this video. In this session, we will cover a few reminders about the upcoming session, as well as a refresher on getting prepared. Then we'll turn our attention to tips and tools, like building a successful pitch, effective emails, meeting with legislators, and getting the most out of testimony, both verbal and written. Please keep in mind that these are just a few ideas for you to consider. And everything is always more effective when it's built on a solid relationship that includes respect and trust. The most effective advocacy always starts with conversations and an understanding about who you are talking with and what will motivate them the most to act in the way you hope. Advocacy in 2022 will be mainly virtual, and it's a short session, 60 days, so virtual meetings will be challenging to schedule, but like gold when you can meet with your legislators. Emails may be the best form of communication, and you'd be surprised at how often you'll get an answer. As a reminder, all the bills from the 2021 session that didn't pass are still alive, and legislators will introduce new bills prior to and during the 2022 session. All committee testimony will be conducted remotely. And even though we are still in a pandemic, the economy is strong and revenue collections are on the upward swing. The challenge with a flush budget, however, is that often the money is spent several times over, and the competition to fund things that haven't had a lot of attention in the past will be fierce. How should you get ready for session? Here's a list of 6 things you can do to prepare, including making sure you're familiar with Washington State PTA's priorities and identifying issues that motivate you to get involved. At a minimum, stay informed by signing up for the weekly Focus on Advocacy newsletter, released each Monday during session. Feel like taking a more active role? Sign up for action alerts to message your legislators or try your voice at testifying. It's actually fun, and we will help you. The Washington State PTA platform is comprised of the positions adopted at the Fall 2020 Legislative Assembly, as well as the legislative principles and all resolutions. During a short session, we will focus on actionable priorities, such as increasing the ratios of school nurses, counselors, psychologists, and social workers in all of our schools. This is a top priority for the governor, OSPI, and most education associations, and PTA brings the parent voice into that conversation. We also will be advocating for legislation that addresses the other priorities and positions listed here. For a complete description of each of these priorities, go to the Advocacy page and click on the 2020-22 Legislative Priorities. You'll also find updated one-page fact sheets and short videos describing the issue and the solutions. How do you get started? Whether it's meeting with a legislator, writing an email, or testifying, here's a guide to making your pitch. First, be clear what your issue or priority is. Describe it. Be brief and to the point. Then, give a noteworthy fact or statistic about the issue. Share a personal story to make it real, or use an example from their legislative district. This is the part where you want them to relate to what you're saying. Make it clear what you're asking them to do. Do you want them to support a bill? Share the bill number and the status, if you know it. Do you want them to support funding? Know if that request is an operating or capital budget funding, whether it was in the governor's budget, and how it will make a difference. Are you asking them to change a law or a bill? Again, be specific. Ask for the amendment. Finish with 3 to 5 words that capture their attention. This is the hook. For example, last year to protect school transportation funding, we used, "It costs the same to transport 5 kids as 50. Yes, that's more than 3 to 5 words, but you get the point. Legislators will receive thousands of emails every day. You want yours to stand out in a good way. All legislators and their legislative assistants use the same email format. First name, dot, last name, at leg.wa.gov. Whenever you're mailing a legislator, make sure their legislative assistant is also on the email to or copy line. That's because emails go into a big account, and legislative assistants sort through and move emails into another account for legislators to read. On the Focus on Advocacy page, you'll find a link to a spreadsheet of legislators and their assistants, or you can also find it by going to the Rosters page on the Public Legislative website. But how do you cut through the clutter and the thousands of emails arriving in their email? First, use a few words in the subject line to tell them what the email is about. For example, meeting request and the date, or vote yes on House Bill 1234, or say constituent and then a semicolon, if you're a constituent, and then the brief subject. Keep emails short. Think one screen's worth of text. But use hyperlinks to take them to data or information that will underscore your point. For example, you can link from your email to the Washington State PTA Advocacy page or one of the priority position videos. It's funny to think about, but your brain actually pays attention and retains things when you use numbers. For example, 3 staff that every school needs, 5 facts about youth suicide and what we can do, supporting student success with 7 key investments. Finally, tell the story. If you don't, someone else will. And always remember to be respectful. Now let's talk about meeting with legislators and talking with your legislators. It's really easier than you think when you use these 7 tips for success. Before the meeting, read their biography on the website and know what their committee assignments are, as well as their interests. This will give you a hook in your introduction and when talking about your issue. To start the meeting, introduce yourself, including when you're their constituent, along with any cool fact to create a bond or common link. Tell them what you plan to talk about. If you're bringing others to the meeting with you, in advance, designate the person who will start the meeting. Take turns and practice, if possible, handing the baton between each other regarding who covers which points, facts, and serves as the closer. This has been made a lot easier with our use of virtual meetings this past 18 months. Make your pitch during the meeting and ask them if they can support your position or whatever it is you're asking them to do. Be respectful during the meeting. It's okay to be firm about your position, but don't be disagreeable or angry. It's also important to know how much time you have for the meeting. Most meetings will be 15 minutes long. Know that legislators are typically bouncing from one virtual meeting to the next, changing topics in quick succession. Be prepared to wrap up with 2 minutes to go. Finally, follow up with a thank you email. This is also an opportunity to summarize your conversation and to provide any information they might have asked for during that meeting. Remember, building a relationship with your legislators is an ongoing partnership, so stay in touch with them several times a year. This might be your first meeting or your 5th meeting, but make it a habit to reach out during the interim when the pace isn't so frantic and legislators have more time to connect. Testifying remotely has a lot of positives, but it does take some planning. Here are some things to know when you're testifying this session. You can sign up to testify once the bill makes the public hearing agenda. The portal closes 1 hour before the public hearing begins. Once you've signed up, you'll get a link to the hearing that is unique to you. Plan to sign on before the hearing begins and make sure your camera and audio are working. You'll be placed in a waiting room. Listen for your name. Usually they will say, "We'll hear from these people next," and then they will list who is on deck. The committee chair controls the flow of the meeting. Usually the chair will have decided how much time each bill on the agenda will get and will decide how many and who will testify. That means that just because you get a link to testify, there may not be time. It's really up to the chair and the vice chair who will be calling names. When they call you, turn your camera and mic on and start. The clock will be ticking. Speaking of clocks, plan to offer 2 minutes of testimony, but always have a 90-second and a 60-second version ready. Listen to how much time the chair is allowing per testifier and wrap up at time or before. After you finish testifying, turn off your camera and audio, but don't leave the meeting just yet. Sometimes the chair will ask if there are questions of the panel. You might get a question. They'll let you know when to leave. Now let's talk about testifying. Your testimony should have an opening, state your position, include the rationale for the position, and then an end with a thank you. 2 minutes is actually a long time, and 60 seconds will fly by. But regardless of how much time you'll have, testimony needs to follow these 3 guidelines: clear, concise, and compelling. So what is clear? Clear is simple, easy to understand language, not jargon. Avoid acronyms and use full words. Try not to use language that is technical or internal to your organization. Clear also starts with addressing the committee chair and the members, stating your name and the organization you are representing, and your position, of favor or opposed to the bill. Concise. Concise means brief and to the point. If someone has already said something, you can agree with them and add new information to underscore the position. Try not to repeat what has already been said. If you're asked a question, answer quickly and clearly. However, if you don't know the answer, please don't guess. Say you'll find out and we'll let them know, and then get back to them. The third point, compelling, is to make the testimony real to legislators, staff, and the audience who is listening. Humanize or personalize whenever possible. Use a personal example or examples from the committee chair's district, your legislator's district, or a district of a legislator who's opposed to your position who's on the committee. Use stories to illustrate your point or emphasize a fact. When appropriate and applicable, be visual or make the story you're telling visual using words that result in that kind of visual image. And use humor judiciously. In the past, written testimony hasn't been particularly valuable. However, due to the virtual nature of committee meetings, there is now an option to submit written testimony, and it will be distributed to the committee members, and it becomes part of the official record. Written testimony is particularly helpful if you don't get to testify. In that case, we will just submit the planned verbal testimony. However, written testimony allows for a more lengthy story and position as well. It must be submitted within 24 hours of the public hearing, and written testimony is limited to 5,000 characters. There's also an option to sign in remotely as support or oppose on a bill. This is also a new feature of virtual committee meetings. In the past, the only way to register your opinion on a bill was by doing that at a kiosk on campus. Now you can sign in from the comfort of your home or your office. Some final thoughts for successful advocacy. Know your legislators. Constituents, voters, count more than paid lobbyists. Know what the timing of the session is, who the leaders are, particularly in a short session. It's important to know that timing and relationships are critical. Know where your position has alignment with other groups or where natural allies can be brought on to support your position. When more people are asking for the same thing, it's harder for the legislature to say no. Remember to follow up with legislators, but give them time to respond too. Don't be a pest. Finally, remember to make the request. Whatever you're asking them to do, you need to close the deal if possible. Even though it will be virtual, PTAs can participate in Focus Day, a single day PTA members meet with their legislators and share common priorities. We encourage you to schedule appointments with your legislators or join a meeting for Focus Day on Monday, January 17th. In addition, we will have given each day that week a big PTA topic and will be reminding legislators about the need to support bills that align with PTA priorities. Check the Focus on Advocacy page for more information. Still have questions about effective advocacy? Join me for an interactive webinar on Tuesday, January 11th. Registration is required and can be found under the Events and Programs tab and looking at the January calendar for the 11th. Thank you for listening, and remember, there's no wrong way to PTA.